Okay. Welcome. And thank you for watching the presentations we had. And let's go ahead and start an interactive session. First of all, I hope all of you can hear me. And I'm inviting the editors that are present to go ahead and turn on their camera and microphones so that people here can see who's available for questions.
Well, it says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Let's see about that. Okay, you're right. Thank you. There you go.
Now it works. Fine, thank you.
Okay, so if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and enter them on the chat. If we just have a few, we can all follow along. If we start getting a flood, I will filter through them and try and direct the non-repetitive questions to the intended person for answering.
Well, there was this question on whether or not to refer to the original source when we talk about literature. And I already answered that in the chat, but maybe I add a few sentences to that. In the literature review, it is not only about referring to somebody who has written about something. It is about you showing that you understand your subject area. So if you say you do research in transaction cost economics, there is no way to not refer to Williamson. Yeah, so you need to show that you know who the key players are. Yeah, and therefore it's always good to start with the original source. Last weekend, a new article came up in Academy of Management Review on an extension of transaction cost economics theory. And it is very nicely written in that way. Yeah? They start by explaining what transaction cost economics is, and of course give credit to Williamson, but then they identify what is not known and what they did to make this unknown known. And so if you are interested in a very good example how to move from the original source to the very latest development, look at that paper that was published as a preprint in Academy of Management Review last weekend.
Okay, we have a question. If a potential paper is discussing a topic which is new in project studies, and not many papers in the target journal have talked about it, talked about it, what is the approach to follow to have it published in the desired journal? Would any of the editors present be open to a very new topic within project studies? I think that sounds as if each journal should chime in once on that one.
Can I say something?
Please.
Sarah, I think that's a fantastic question. Of course, we are welcoming new contents. I think that's a perfect issue to do. So novelty is one of the key issues there that we seek. And there are lots of things that could be tackled. I was, for instance, very surprised that identity and image are so little discussed in project studies. So issue and image, identity and image that are kind of strategy issues, but they are not really that well covered in project studies at all. So I think there's plenty of those kinds of topics that are really, really interesting to our readers, but nobody has really done them. So I think one of the key issues that you need to pay attention to is acknowledge the roots. So where does your topic come from then? And how does it fit with the discourse going on in project studies? So where does it fit? So what is the domain in which it fits, and where in the which domain of project studies it's bringing the novelty that you're proposing? So I think novelty is always a very good thing to include in your papers.
Well, I can only support what Mia just said. We are, by the very nature of a research journal, we are interested in novelty. We look for papers that really bring something new. But on the other hand, it must be relevant for projects and project management. Yeah, so if you can show that, then we are certainly interested. Sometimes we have new contribution, novelty in form of a strong contribution to particular industry, like the construction industry. Then we in fact have to say no to these types of papers, because there's more novelty for construction people than there is novelty for project management researchers. Yeah, so sometimes when it drifts all too far away from project management, even though it is remotely related to project management, we still see no real interest in from our readership in this particular type of paper. But generally speaking, we are of course interested in novel papers, in novel perspectives.
If I may add what Mia and Ralph said, it is also important because in this question, what I see is that even if the journal haven't published on the topic and they have no article on that topic, what is important in listening to the presentation on literature review is what is important, what support your research? What is the literature review that support your research? This is the first question to answer. And the second one is, as Ralph mentioned and put some emphasis on it, it has to be connected, of course, to project management. So if this literature review or if this article improve our understanding of project management and you can explain it very clearly, this is what we want.
There's a slight extension to that question where Sarah says that I'm personally very interested in mental health and well-being and how project, now it's gone, hold on, and how project work affects this. It is rather under-researched in project studies and more portrayed in HRM studies. You're right, it is more a subject of HRM studies, but it would be very interesting for the project management community to learn about the mental health issues for project workers and project managers, and maybe also steering committees. And so from my perspective, I would welcome such a new perspective, absolutely. We've, in fact, Christine Unterhitzenberger and myself, we're currently running a special issue in PMJ on project behavior, yeah, where I would see this fit quite nicely.
Okay, I'm going.
Add here just a sentence. Yeah, International Journal of Project Management. If you look into it, there's a lot of human resource management topics. Also in Project Management Journal, there's a lot of resource management topics, human resource management topics. So I think the challenge is always to bring it into the context of projects, to relate it to a debate that is already going on in project management. But to come in with a different theory, with a topic that is under-researched, I think it's welcomed. Sorry, Gary.
That's okay. I was moving on here. We have it's sort of a comment and question. An individual had different experiences with our journals, and so it's not clear as to exactly what the real problem behind the methodologies were. Okay. And I guess the implicit question then is, how do you resolve any conflict along those lines? And also a concern about having difficulties in other journals, in journals from other fields, publishing a project management paper.
If I may just react to this one quickly, probably if you have different feedback from two different journals with the methodology, probably both have a point there. Yeah, just as an assumption, don't know. But this is one of the reasons why we're actually doing these mini conferences and also have done all these editorials to bring more clearness and transparency what we are expecting if you're writing a paper for one of the journals. And I think what is also important here is that you need to be careful at which stage you hand in a paper. So very often papers are premature. So they are not ready yet to hand in for any of the journals. And my recommendation here would be, please go for peer review. Ask colleagues before to get to a certain level where most of the issues are already solved. Yeah, and don't use the journals for just trying out.
Okay, as I guess somewhat as an aside to this, the next question that came up with was on calls for papers for special issues that invite abstracts as proposals. May I consult with an individual guest editor prior to the submission of the abstract? And well, the abstract is the easiest way to get feedback, because if you are talking about submitting a topic, if you want to converse about a topic with the guest editor, you need to essentially convey a lot of the information that would be in the abstract anyway for them to be able to provide the feedback. It does not mean that you should not consult with them ahead of time, because you might get some good clues with regards to revising the abstract or changing it so that it would be more favorable to the editors of the special issue. Anyone else want to add anything?
Could I add something? At least in IJPM, we would normally say who is the contact point for a special issue. Even if there are multiple guest editors, then there's one contact point. So my recommendation would be to contact that contact point with any issues before the submission of the abstract, but it's perfectly fine. So if you are not sure about whether your scope fits the special issue, you can naturally consult the contact person. But it's not necessary. So at least we look into all submissions. So for instance, I'm right now editing one special issue, and there were, I think, almost 30 submissions of abstracts at that point, and all of them are looked into. All of them are considered to begin with, and then we begin the normal process of which ones are invited and so on. So there's no necessity to contact. But of course, if you want to have a second opinion, then you can contact the contact person.
I think, if I may add, this is an important point, because we don't want to have everybody who's sending a paper saying, does it fit or in your journal? But from time to time, especially if you're a PG student and you are questioning yourself, does it fit with the journal? Then we will be pleased to give you direction. But do not believe that in answering you back, saying that it fits, that it means that it will be automatically accepted. So there's a difference between, confirming that it fits with the scope and aims of the journal, but it doesn't mean that this is automatically a yes.
Okay, there is a couple of questions here actually that relate to working across disciplines. One of them here was with regards to knowledge management and project management, and another one comes up trying HR, psychology, and mega project. And the questions essentially look towards how can we ensure that that we're focusing on the right that we have the right focus for a project management journal, and what types of contributions can we bring in from other disciplines?
I can take this. I think it's about the positioning of the paper. This is the question. This is what the question is about. And so if you want to go for a knowledge management journal, as you bring in this example, then the positioning must be knowledge management, and project management might be just an add-on. If you want to position something for a project management journal, then you need to more heavily root and explain, even if it's now a knowledge management theory coming from outside the field, why it makes a contribution to project management. And then it's nicely suitable for a project management journal. So it's all about positioning. It's about giving the right argument why you are fitting into that domain, into that debate. And I would really recommend anybody to read other papers. Read the journal, read papers, read recent papers, and also see how they position their research, how they frame it. That's the first part of the question. So maybe somebody else would like to take on the second part.
Can you repeat the second part, Gary?
Well, the second part, I think that it's pretty much the same. It's just that it was coming from two different areas here. One was from HRM and psychology, two mega projects. So I think that actually Martina addressed both. If there's a dissent to either of the individuals who asked that question, please just go ahead and submit a follow-up question there. We do have a question about data from the quantitative papers. And is the data set available for the PM journals to be shared? Okay, I think that I'll take a first shot at that. Just recently, at least, the Project Management Journal through SAGE has been inviting the authors to a shared database system. And to be honest, I don't even recall the name of that system at this point in time. It's totally a voluntary process. At this point in time, I am not aware of any of the authors who have volunteered to share the data in that particular fashion. However, myself, I receive a large number of inquiries about some of the papers that I've published and written if the data is available for sharing. Sometimes it is, sometimes it is not. Frankly, because of institutional review board requirements, at least in the States, if it was not an exempt study, I am not allowed to share the data to begin with. So I think that might be part of the issue. Anything to add, anyone?
Yeah, in International Journal of Project Management, there has been quite for many years the possibility to add the data, yeah, and but it's very, very seldom done. And I think this is the case because of the restriction, Gary, you just mentioned. Yeah. So there's the possibility, yes, but rarely used.
Yeah, in fact, I think it is more an issue with the author of the original paper. So if you want to have access to the original data or the sample data, then just contact the author rather than the journal.
Okay, Natalie, it looks like we have a question directed to you about your action research presentation. Are you specifically interested in papers using action research approaches?
The The answer is very easy. Yes. and what I can say is that, as we mentioned in the presentation, sometimes, you know, it's difficult to publish action research because of a lack of rigor. We publish, Per is here today, and Shenka, Per, and Eric publish a special issue that gives some examples of what is good action research and how do you structure your action research, how do you structure your paper. And pretty soon we will have a second special issue on that topic that goes a little bit further in the explanations. So have a look at these special issues, what they are saying, and when you structure your paper, make sure that in terms of methodology, you describe very in details. Take a little bit more time, more space in your paper to explain what was your process or your processes that you use to and the different methods you use to conduct your action research. And to make sure that when we review the paper, we understand what you did and we follow you. So this is the advice I can give to you. But of course, yes, we welcome action research approaches.
Okay, one limitations of the single case study is generalizations of the results. What is the best possible way to address that problem?
Can I attempt to respond?
Yes.
As I mentioned in the presentation, there's no need to attempt to generalize to a population. You don't need to try and say that because this case was like this, also any other case is like this. You don't need to do that. Instead, I think what you need to seek is kind of support from earlier research, support from theory. So theoretical generalization is sought. And then the question is, are there other examples regarding similar kinds of cases at the similar level of analysis concerning the phenomenon that you're studying in a similar kind of context or a different kind of context that would support your research? What kind of support would you find from all these angles to your research? And then that will help and justify your key claims from your research. So that would be my kind of proposal, that you consider all these angles and then kind of seek theoretical support for your claim.
Yeah, maybe I can just add and support that. So it's not the intention of a single case study to generalize anything. Yeah, anything to population, sorry. The intent is to generalize to an existing theory. Yeah? And to give you an example, let's say you do a single case study on how is complexity dealt with in a company. Yeah, your theoretical perspective is systems theory, a cybernetic type of perspective towards the problem, and you have the theoretical lens of the theory of variety in states. I just lost the name for it. But the more variety a system can have, the more it can deal with complexity. So if you see in your company, in your case, that the company has more tools, more techniques, more processes, in other words, more variety, than other companies in dealing with complexity, then you have a support of this theory. Yeah, that is what we do in case studies. Yeah? We want to support a given theory by using that theory and extending it into a new circumstance, into a new context, so that we see the theory holds also in this particular new context. Yeah. And by the way, the name of the theory is the theory of requisite variety, which is part of the systems theory.
Perhaps another viewpoint to that is the testing of the boundaries of your study. So you can always kind of look outside of your boundaries also. So look at the different kinds of cases. So why are they different from your case? So also that might be a way to seek if your finding is suitable to a specific situation.
Are there any other questions?
Somebody has raised his hand, Constantino something.
Okay.
Hi there. Sorry for that. It was mostly accidental, I believe. But since I've now opened the camera, yeah, my name is Konstantinos Kiritopoulos, Associate Professor at the National Technical University of Athens in Project Management. I do have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you very much for this very insightful presentation, and thanks to the organizers as well. That's very good. One thing is, I found myself that for the past few years, I've moved to social research in project management. But I'm an engineer by degree. So you do understand that when I come across, these little algorithms, the typical resource allocation problems and stuff like that, this comes back to me, and I feel very comfortable with that. Do you think that the area of publishing in quantitative, highly quantitative and algorithmic issues has gone forever in project management journals? That's one thing. And the second thing, when we do a literature review paper, there are two schools of thought. One, it is that we do not include in our research other literature review papers, and the other one is that we do. So what would be your ideas about that? Thank you very much again.
I may take the first part of the question. Yeah, a couple of years ago, we made the strategic decision in International Journal of Project Management not to have any mathematical method developments, algorithm demonstrations. And the reason was twofold, I would say. The one was that we had to give journal a distinct profile, and we had some 1,200, 300 papers a year, and we just had to make a decision. And the decision was to move the journal more into a management journal, more into bridging between project management studies or project studies, including portfolio management, you call it. So in a wider sense, out to innovation, strategy, organizational behavior, you call it again. And so that was really a strategic decision why we wanted to go forward. And on the other hand, the second was also about the readership. Yeah, the readership of International Journal of Project Management, as we are in a cooperation with International Project Management Association and APM, we have quite a lot of practitioners reading the journal. And that was also one of the reasons why we wanted to be very applied and less mathematical.
And there's also maybe one issue with that, is that we have to find the reviewers, the qualified reviewers to review a paper. And in our communities, sometimes it is difficult to find these reviewers. So that's why, as Martina said, it is maybe not the best place if you have very strong and very complex mathematical models to publish in project management. For this reason, to find very solid reviewers. But the second one also is that from time to time, practitioners are reading our papers, so they have to understand the outcomes of your research easily. They have to follow you in your approach. So it might be, you know, not the right place to publish this kind of paper.
Or maybe summarizing it from my perspective of what has been said so far, and what also the project management journal perspective is that I think we have gone beyond the point where we try to squeeze another millisecond of predictability out of a process. Yeah, we all know that projects run late. Yeah, and being 100% precise with mathematics does not change that. Yeah, and therefore we look into other things like people's behavior, yeah, like the well-being of people and other subjects we talked about this afternoon. And we question to a large extent whether it helps projects to be 100% predictable with mathematical formulas, which we will never see realizing themselves in reality. And therefore we welcome quantitative contributions as long as they tell us there is a correlation between variables, there's impact, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to the optimization of processes, I think an operations journal is a better choice than a project management journal.
Let me just add a little bit to that. Coming from an industrial engineering background, I have perhaps a little more sympathy for the mathematical approaches. However, what I want to say is that the mathematical result is actually not the valuable fruit of the research. Okay, you might want to consider some sort of design science approach to consider a particular problem that you are trying to solve, but it's not the mathematical formulas. It's not the optimization problem or the solution technique you use. It's the creativity that you've put into the model development, because somewhere in there are going to be some insights into some general problems for project management that you can probably turn into a paper that would hold an interest to us. But it's not particularly easy to do, and it's also rare, but you need to step back in the process. It's not the mathematical model that I'm interested in. It's why did you decide to include these features? Why is this new? Why is this something that nobody else has thought of to include in their modeling process? So if you can present something along those lines, I would love to get a paper along those lines. Okay, let's see what else has come up. Okay, I have a question that would perhaps be general, so address it to the editors. What is the way in which PhD students can engage with the journals?
The question is, what is engaged? I mean, the moment you send a paper, it's engaged.
Well, I think there are other ways. Read a lot, review, and indeed submit papers, come to meet the editors' sessions in conferences.
And what I would like in the journal to say that I welcome PhD students to register as reviewers, and I try to select PhD students when I select the reviewers with other researchers, you know, with well-known. What I do when I select the reviewers, when I see that the profile of a PhD student fit, then I will select this student, and I will select also as well the well-known researchers, so it can balance in the review. But what I noticed very frequently, PhD students are very disciplined when they conduct their review, and this I really appreciate that. And from time to time, they do much better than well-known academics. So that's, you're very welcome. This is a great experience because it is also show you how to structure and criticize papers, how to structure a paper. So I welcome PhD students to register as reviewers.
And maybe as an add-on to my relatively short answer in the beginning, I get everyday emails through LinkedIn or directly to my BI email address. Yeah, I get everyday emails from PhD students who have questions. So for me, it is just obvious that if you have a question, just send it on to the person you think is best suited to answer it. That should not replace the PhD supervisor. Yeah, so sometimes I need to send the email back saying, ask your supervisor because he or she knows what the context of your study is. But if you have a particular question, whether this or that research is of interest for the journal, I think all of us here in this panel would be open to give you an answer.
Yeah, I totally agree, Ralph. Yeah. So I think what people just need to understand, and you said that example, I just want to emphasize it is we are not there to coaching your paper. This is not what I would be able to do in the role of an editor. But of course, I can give guidance and I can tell whether a paper fits into the scope of the journal or not. As there's also a new kid on the block, Project Leadership in Society, as a new journal that has been established only end of last year. So we are in the first year of full publication history. This is also an opportunity for PhD students that are in an early phase and try to get things published, to come with papers that might not kind of or might not be kind of that further developed already to fit in any of the other journals, but needs still a little bit more of guidance and also might not make the major contributions yet. So that would be then the place to send. Yeah, so just telling you that there's also a new journal that welcomes PhD research.
Okay. The next question we have is working on a thesis and have not come across full papers focused on scope creep. Just wanted to get your opinion and I guess the question actually is, where might there be sources for this? Is there better terminology to be using with regards to searches and research?
Well, in my understanding, everything that Flueberg publishes is on scope creep. Yeah, so every time we talk about projects not delivering quality or going over time, it is typically referred back to scope creep. So I think it's one of the broadest researched areas in project management.
Yeah, and then there might be the other vocabulary. So it could be feature creep or engineering change orders or engineering change or something like that. So I think that might be a challenge to keep the terminology clear because it's represented in so many different domains.
Yeah, I agree. I think that might be the difficulty coming
requirements management.
Yeah, from the IS side, information system side, scope creep's a major issue with regards to the projects there. So you find that certainly in a lot of the journals that in the IS journals publish project papers. And you have to find the right keywords to be searching on that. It would come under change management issues in the IS side. So
yeah, look at what Pinto has written, look at what Flueberg has written. it's a good starting point.
I think it's also interesting to note that scope creep is rather a word from practice we use in project management practice, and we all know what the practical meaning of it. And while I agree what Ralph said, that Bent Flubio has done a lot of research on that, I doubt he would ever used this word, scope creep. Yeah. So I think the challenge here is probably when you're coming more from a practical perspective, looking into research, that some of the wordings you need to be very careful and see maybe they are not used at all in some of the research, but the principle is there. Yeah. So probably here we have performance, success, all these would relate probably to scope creep. And well, when you first, I saw that question in the chat, I was thinking, not sure if I would be so much interested in that. Yeah? That was my first reaction to it, being very, very direct now with you. Nevertheless, don't be disappointed. Maybe it's just the way you phrase it. Yeah, just using the word scope creep that makes other researchers not so interested in it.
Okay, a question on literature reviews. From field experience, you will be able to recognize solid and relevant research to review. But if we follow a protocol of mass survey of literature, we may end up just summarizing the norm or average of a topic rather than providing any insight. Any advice on how to frame this kind of literature review? Well, I'll just go ahead and throw in a condition here. As I would go and start with some of the sources that the references in the editorial on literature reviews that was published. It's also available open access on the SAGE website because there's some good references on literature reviews. There are, depending upon which discipline you come from, the medical discipline recognizes 13 different types of literature reviews. But even just within trying to put it into a more disciplined situation, the research questions can be very specific and very broad, and then that dictates a lot of times as to how comprehensive the review has to be. Because if it's a specific research question that you're doing a literature review on, yes, you need a much more comprehensive and complete review because you have a narrower field to start with. But if it's a very broad question, there are approaches suggested in, like in the book by Hart, that talk about a way to conduct a more of a progressive style research where you start with some foundational papers and then branch out from there and add the evidence in that fashion, almost treating it as if it's a multiple case study where you're adding cumulative evidence.
I could also add that if you do have an insight, build it into your paper. The technicalities and the numbers are just evidence. And the insight is much more interesting and inspiring. And I think that's one of the key rejection reasons that the insight is missing from literature reviews. So typically, I would say that the early versions of literature reviews report the technicalities and lack the insight. But I think the insight has to be built in from the early on. So you need to have a need and inspiration to go for a certain review. Then you have to do the technicalities and methodological issues, but then you need to argument your insight, what you found from the analysis. And I think that's the biggest challenge usually with literature reviews. It's a huge deal to identify that insight and justify it based on the review. So if you have such an insight, that's a very positive start.
And the slide that Gary presented in his, the one where you have different types different types of literature review, I think it is really useful for students, useful for researchers, that you have different approaches that you can use to structure your literature review. And thanks, Gary, for that slide, because it was it is really helpful, I believe.
One point from my side, I think it's interesting in the question that whoever asked the question says you end up with a summary of what is already known. If you end up with a summary, you have done a major mistake in a literature review, because a literature review is critical. Yeah, from the beginning on, from the first word on, you are critical about what other people have written. You identify what is not known just as much as you identify what is known. Yeah, and as Gary said, yeah, and through that you automatically create new insight. Yeah, so if you only look at what people have written, then you're right, you come to a summary. But this is not a literature review at the PhD level or literature review that is publishable in a journal. Yeah, a literature review in a journal must be critical, skeptical, must identify gaps, must identify areas that are not yet investigated and are worthwhile investigating. And Gary showed us a slide with 3 exemplary literature reviews, and I can only stress that, especially the one by Shona Brown and Kathleen Eisenhardt on the automobile industry. It's a wonderful example how they identified what is not known and build that into a model for future research. Yeah, have a look at this paper. It's old, but it's great.
Okay, we have a question with regards to research context. Many studies are conducted in the context of the construction industry. Do we still welcome papers in this context, and what should be considered for such papers? And also, just are there any contexts where we should encourage research?
Probably I should take that, because there is often a misunderstanding in International Journal of Project Management. Still, many consider it as a construction management journal, but we are not. We are a management journal. That means that papers generally on the construction management are only implicitly referring to projects and project management. They are clearly out of scope. On the other hand, construction management is a very interesting context. Yeah, so construction industry, construction companies are a very interesting context for project studies. So it's very often a matter of, again, positioning. Yeah, so you don't want to position it as a construction management paper, but you need to position it as a project management paper. You need to position it and contribute to project management, to a project-based organization. You call it whatever is interesting here. Yeah, but not in general to construction management. I think this is a quite common mistake when it comes to International Journal of Project Management. So we still welcome project management papers in the context of construction. They're very welcome.
Yeah, I can only support that from the perspective of project management journal. I think a very simple test that you can do is to look through the reference list of your paper. If there are more journals listed from the construction industry than from project management, then your paper might be a good candidate for a construction management journal and not for a project management journal, and vice versa.
I have to say, I fully agree with what Martina and Ralph said. The journal, my journal, welcome papers in using the construction industry, especially because we had some special issues on mega projects. So of course, this is connected to the construction industry. But again, it has to improve the knowledge in project management. So you can study a project, in the construction industry, but does it improve our knowledge in project management.
Okay, we have a question in systematic literature reviews. Should we include other literature reviews in our databases or exclude them from the data analysis and compare our results with them afterwards? Just start off quickly. If it's a systematic literature review and you've got the specific research question, yes, it needs to be included in the database. Now, the question is, with regards to the analysis of it, you are going to be looking and doing a critique of all of the papers that you've discovered. And in this particular case, if there is a literature review already out there, you will be critiquing that and you will be identifying any shortcomings or acceptance of their conclusions, disagreements with their conclusions, and so on down the line. If there's a literature review already out there, you'd best be able to defend why you're doing another one. Is it just an update of it? Is it because the other one has drawn improper inferences, or you feel incomplete inferences from what's available to you?
Maybe one of the key issues that you have to consider there is whether you include merely empirical studies in your analysis. So kind of you can choose, if you look at the literature reviews and earlier conceptual studies, you can position your study there, you can frame your study into the concepts there, but you can decide to limit your scope of analysis to earlier empirical research. And that's your choice. And then you have to explain that in the method section.
Okay, a further question on the research context. IT and government. Other industries are understudied or paper proposals have higher rejection rates. Contexts such as cultural projects like image industry and social projects or other industries that we might suggest that are either, I assume, either underrepresented or overrepresented perhaps. And a good question to follow up with that, perhaps the problem with these submissions is rely on is a lack of theoretical advancement.
Or lack of connection to project management.
Or maybe it's not well structured. If the paper is not well structured, you know, the topic seems quite interesting, but if it is not well structured, then unfortunately it cannot be published. I don't think the context, you know, or the industry has an impact on the decision. It's really, is it a good paper? Is it good for the knowledge development and project management? And is it well structured based on theoretical foundation and so on? So this is how we make our decisions to accept or reject the papers. Sorry, Mia, I just interrupt you.
Well, we have a few industries that are, I wouldn't say underrepresented, but they are not very well represented, but they are very successful, very impactful. Yeah, like Pseudo's work on the film industry, for example. Yeah, and the other work on project ecologies and so on. So very little is published in terms of quantity, but these papers have a high quality and are cited many, many times. So I don't think that the industry itself is a hindrance in getting published. Yeah, it is more the quality of the submission that decides that.
I agree with everything what was said, but I would actually love to see more papers from very diverse industries. So from arts or like film industry. I mean, we have some seminal papers, yeah, but there's not much. Yeah, there's sometimes IT industry. Sometimes we also see health context. But I would think that there is space. There is new areas. It might also be a little bit about the maturity of project management in these different industries. Whether it is a research arena that is easily for you to access. But I would actually find it extremely interesting to look how projects work in contexts where there's not so much project management maturity. Yeah? Also in the context of entrepreneurship, for instance. Yeah? So I would see that there is a high potential for us to grow.
Yeah, our special issue on strategic projects and programs now is going to potentially feature very interesting new kinds of projects like divestitures or integration projects after mergers and acquisitions. So I think different types of projects and different types of environments are highly interesting. And I also, we recently had an article about personal values of construction project managers in literature. And I found that so interesting that our kind of the managers that we are educating and we find important, they are in the literatures, and they have kind of representations of the values that we are now studying in different kinds of environments. So there is possibility for versatility in the approaches and areas from which we seek content.
Okay, I have a question with regards to methodologies. Which among the two methodologies is easier to get published for a young researcher, qualitative or quantitative?
I think in project management, not comparable with management fields, because in many management journals, they are more looking for quantitative studies and less for qualitative studies. I would say in our field, we like both. Yeah, we like quantitative, we like qualitative, we like mixed approaches. I think that is not so much the question, but I would say it depends on your research question. It depends on your interest. It depends. I mean, I have always been attracted to questions that have led me to more qualitative approaches. Yeah, so I think it's also a little bit, or the majority is the interest and the research question you want to pursue.
Yeah, from a project management journal perspective, there is no difference. Yeah, so we are interested in both. In fact, we are also interested in mixed method, and we are also interested in conceptual papers. Yes, so there's no priority or preference in any of these. Yeah, it's the quality that counts.
Nothing to add. I agree.
Okay, question with regards to the Project Management Institute has several communities of practice in various industries and fields. Would it make sense to have assistant editors, say project management in medicine, NGOs, government, et cetera, that process submissions in their field, which get published in their sections of the journal?
Maybe I take that because it's about PMI. I think there's a big difference between PMJ and PMI. Yeah, what PMI publishes is practitioner literature, which is developed through a process that has no academic rigor. Yeah, in fact, you probably have seen that before as a response to some of the submissions that we get. I sent back desk reject papers that use definitions taken from practitioner literature, including the PMI PMBOK and other publications by PMI, because these definitions are developed without academic rigor, so they have no credibility in the academic world. And so from that perspective, it would be highly risky to bring in people who typically have a completely different language and a completely different thinking, and expose them to the reviewers of academic articles, because it will almost automatically be rejected. And so as much as I like to build the bridge between academia and practitioner, I don't think it's done by taking people who are not exposed to academic rigor and academic processes on a daily basis and expose them to the reviewers of our journals.
Anyone else comment on that?
I think if we take it away from PMI, another question that might be behind here is that questioning how the structure of the departments or how we distribute the papers among our associate editors. And in International Journal of Project Management, the content is in the foreground, so the topic is in the foreground. However, the associate editors will also look for reviewers that understand the context. And for some contexts like medicine, NGOs, we might not have so many people in our reviewing database. So if researchers can offer this particular context in combination with project management, I mean, I now speak for my journal, but probably the others might also agree to that. They might be very welcome in the journal as reviewers, yeah, because that even increases the quality of considering the context.
Okay, we've run a little bit over here, but that's okay. I hope that everybody has found this informative. We will be, this has been recorded. We'll clean it up a little bit and we'll get it posted. And everybody who has registered for this event will receive an email with the links to this, to the videos that derive from this, as well as the calls for papers that the current journals have, and information about how to just access a lot more information about what we've covered today. If you did not, I know that the link got out there, so if you did not register for this and you do wish emails, please go ahead and register actually for the Asia version of this, and that'll put you on our email list. And if that fails, then go ahead and send me a direct email, and I'll make sure that I add you as well. You can send that to pmj@uccs.edu, but hopefully we can get you captured through the regular system. So thank all of you colleagues, and thank all of you guests. We appreciate the time you've spent with us, and look forward to seeing you sometime in person or at maybe future micro conferences that we put together.
Thank you, everybody. And thanks, Gary.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.